So we have Nancy Rommelman with us. She has been reporting for Reason, kind of tracking what's going on in Portland. I think it's been really confusing to a lot of people who aren't there. You know, we see imagery on social media, maybe we'll see a clip on CNN, Fox, or whatever. But because we're not there, we don't really know what's going on, and I think we're getting a very limited picture from just the internet or cable news. You've been there for a number of days, reporting, talking to people on all sides of it, and you've reported out these pieces for Reason, which I think are really great. They're really nuanced and textured, and like you kind of get a sense like you're actually there, which is what I really liked about it. It was very like new journalism from the '60s or '70s. I felt like I was reading like Norman Mailer or something. Like it was actually really cool. Like it was a good time. Like they're actually like entertaining pieces to read beyond everything else. So I really recommend everyone go there and read them at Reason. But Nancy, why don't you just start off like what is happening in Portland? Like what has your experience been like over the past few days, and what are we not getting from what we're looking at?
Well, I'll tell you that it's actually my second time out here in about a month. I have to really hand it to Reason. I texted the editor-in-chief, Catherine Mangu Ward, on a Sunday morning and said, I want to head out there for you. And she's like, go. And I was there that day. That was about a month ago when the feds were still in the federal building. And, it's not really hard to do this kind of reporting, guys. You just kind of show up with a pad and your eyes open, and maybe you take a few videos, but you have to be curious about what's really going on. And I think the problem that we've got, and this is something, I have a lot of super terrific smart journalist friends, and we're in New York, and they're saying the same thing to me that you said, Zaid. They're saying, what the hell is going on in Portland? And if they can't figure it out and they're trying, then we're really getting a limited picture. We're getting either marauding bands of savages coming to your town, or they're all peaceful protesters, guys, like First Amendment. And like, yeah, both of those things are a little bit true, but a lot of other things are true too. So what I'm seeing on the ground is something that I think has been developing in Portland for a long time. So I lived here. I'm from New York City, but I lived here for 15 years, and I moved back to New York last year. And I wrote a piece about a year ago for Tablet called Portlandization could be coming to a city near you, or something like that. And unfortunately, it kind of proved true. And it's that you've got a lot of people coming to Portland over the past 10 years with a lot of idealism. They're going to build a better future. They're going to live outside. They're going to be green. They're not going to eat animals. They're going to just sort of really fight for justice. They don't have deep roots in Portland. A lot of it is very progressive. More and more, it's sort of crankily progressive. And then you've got COVID, and people are out of work, and businesses close, and kids are not in school, and there's problems financially, and you're cooped up. And then George Floyd is killed, and the city explodes. And it was ready to explode. It had already been exploding over the years, but now it really found some footing that was sort of unassailable. You had Black Lives Matter. You had Antifa, who has had a pretty big presence here in the city. And you have Black Bloc. And then you've got the various people that whenever there's a movement, they're going to glom onto it. And now we're seeing, on a nightly basis, we're seeing fewer of the peaceful protest marches, though you do see some cool stuff. Like there's a caravan of cars that goes around once a week. That's pretty cool. And you've got like an artist by the waterfront who's like, let's make art out of this. But mostly every night, and what we see and what I've been around to a certain extent is the sort of Black Bloc and people that join in. And they're sort of, they're the wing of Antifa that believes in using violence to get what they want. And they claim that they're out there for Black Lives Matter, and they do a lot of Black Lives Matter shouting. But I don't think a lot of people really believe that's what's going on at all. They're out there because they want to, what is their saying? They want to abolish all police and all jails, and basically sort of the foundation of the city. And they do a lot of shouting, which at the moment, it seems to me, is a replacement for actual ideas. They're pretty good at tearing stuff up, but I have yet to see them build anything. So,
What is the like theory of change here? Like, do they believe that they're at the vanguard of a revolution, and that in their wake the people are going to rise up and smash the state, or do they think that they're just going to fuck shit up for as long as they can? Like, are there any demands? Is there an end goal? How exactly do they think that they're going to affect change?
So my understanding of Antifa is that it's sort of deliberately decentralized, and they do have like common goals, which is, they want to abolish the police, they want to abolish jails. Um, but they also, from my understanding, is that they're not going to police other people. First of all, they're all in kind of little factions, and different factions go out and do different things. And they're not going to police other people's ideas of how they want to get stuff done. If in fact there are a list of demands, and sometimes lists of demands are put out, mostly pretty completely unrealistic lists of demands. But one thing that Portland, what really has a toehold in local government, is that it is extremely progressive in the way that people on the city council, and to a certain extent the mayor, Ted Wheeler, and to a certain extent the new DA that's just come in, they really do believe that we have to really abolish a lot of the police. Now, I'm not an expert on police and what parts should be abolished. I know, there are troubles, and obviously you've got bad apples. But when they come in, they just come in and start like setting the police station on fire. Like that's the way that they do it. Now, you do have, the Portland police have been defunded for a long time, for about 5 years now. I think they're working at 50% of what they're supposed to happen. And in a growing city, that's a problem, right? Because you've got attrition and you can't train as many people. And really, right now, like, who wants to be a Portland police officer that's a solid guy or gal when every night all you get is kill yourself, quit your job? It's not super fun. They have passed laws that, the new DA came in and said he's dropping, it's about 85% of the arrests or the charges against protesters of the 500 since May 29th. They're just no longer criminal for the protesters, which is interesting, right? Are those laws only for the protesters, or is that for everybody else too?
One thing I've been wondering is like, so there's obviously like kind of a radical wing of this where there's people who are setting fires, or in some cases even like getting into physical fights with police officers and other people. But there's also kind of a larger protest movement, I imagine, of people who maybe they were protesting earlier in the day. This is a larger group of people. How do the goals differ between those two groups of people? Between like your ordinary protester in Portland who maybe just supports some kind of police reform so they're out there, versus like the anarchists? Do you feel like there's some overlap in goals, or do you feel like it's completely different?
I feel like there's, I think the main big body of protests, yes, they may want to do some defunding of the police, but they really were more Black Lives Matter protesters, from my understanding. In terms of overlap, I don't know so much that it's seepage as sympathy. Portland is incredibly blue, incredibly anti-Trump. I mean, I lived here when Trump was elected. There literally were marches for like 3 months, something to do with the Trump administration. They just hated it. When Trump set in the feds for, that they didn't roll it out particularly well, shocking, right? You had a lot of people just like their hair set on fire. It's like, how dare you? How dare you come into our city when we're peacefully protesting? And at that point, not all of it hadn't been. They'd already been starting stuff. They'd sent the Justice Center, which is the cop shop, on fire. And, they were the small faction that was acting badly. But that small faction now started to get sympathy from the community, right? Because the enemy of my enemy, or however that, that phrase goes. So I will tell you, when I was at the federal courthouse, there's a lot of stuff going on, and fires and barbecues being thrown, and tear gas, and et cetera, et cetera. And the last night I was here, on my last trip out here, there was a laser light show on the outside of the federal building. This was not made by your teenage sister in her bedroom, okay? This was super slick. You had people that are like, I'm not saying specifically, but could be like designers at Nike. Like, you know what? We're sympathetic to Black Lives Matter. And even though these yahoos down here beating the shit out of the building probably have nothing to do with it, they say they are, and I don't know, like, I want to help. That's a little bit of a problem. I'll tell you what else is a problem. I don't see how much more unpopular Mayor Ted Wheeler can get. I mean, you've seen the videos of 8,000 people shouting at him to go F himself. His challenger is openly pro Antifa,
Whoa.
right up there.
I
Right
saw
up there
that
now.
she wore a skirt with like Mao's face on it at one point, and it became a big story because everyone was like,
Oh
"Why
my
do you have that?
God.
Why do you have that skirt? Like,
Oh
is,
my
is that a
God.
common skirt in like Portland or like?"
Yeah, we all have them. What are you kidding? But she is, and there's again, if Antifa is sort of like purposely decentralized, then axiomatically it doesn't have a figurehead, right? Well, maybe Sarah Iannarone becomes the figurehead, who, if she gets to be mayor, which most people say she won't be. Okay, but she's the only one that has a chance on the ballot against Wheeler. Uh, is she going to be the one sort of pulling the levers behind the scene? What's going to be okay? What's going to be deemed okay now? Like how much violence is okay? It's like, well, they're just expressing themselves. I mean, you saw what I put. Did you see what I posted this morning? And I woke up this morning and saw a video of in the same little neighborhood I'm writing about, Kenton. They funneled into the residential streets like they did when I was with them one night, and they shined lights into people's houses. This is, I don't know, midnight. I don't know. And they just started shouting, "Wake up, motherfucker, wake up." And like over and over and over, hundreds of people shining a light into your bedroom, ostensibly because you should come out and join them. Or like, hey, if you're in there asleep, you're like not part of the solution. It's like, wait, excuse me? Like, I, I have no other life here. I don't have like little kids here. I have to, just because you don't have to go back to school, I don't have to get up for work. Um, I mean, I- if this happens every night in this city, what are people going to do?
This is like Antifa Black Bloc folks who are doing
Yep.
that.
Yep. But if you look at them, I mean, a lot of them are black. When I've been out with them, I'm going to go out with them again tonight. It's black bloc. But you also have like, college looking kids out there just in clothes. Um, Definitely mostly young people, almost always white. A few Latina, maybe, later on, or when there's somebody in there getting on a bullhorn, that'll be someone who's black sometimes. But a lot of times there's none of that. A lot of times it's just, it's kind of, hooliganism. It's burning a mattress. It's burning a dumpster. And it's shouting. It's a lot of yelling is what it is, and a lot of sloganeering.
Do you have a sense that like this is actually affecting the lives of people in Portland? Like, is it in like a tangible way? Because a lot of people who sort of, not defend it maybe, but just kind of like downplay it, say, well, it's a very concentrated thing, mostly downtown, and it's not really like affecting people. I mean, do you find that it's actually something that is affecting like the city itself and the sort of outskirts of the city?
You're very astute because actually the first piece I wrote for Reason back in July, I talked about how, like, listen, guys, I know, you watch the news, it looks like the whole city's on fire, but really it's like a 2 block area. Um, it's not a 2 block area anymore because they used to have a locus, which was the federal building. Now that is next door to Justice Center, which is the big cop building. So they are down there a lot. But now they're spread. They meet in a different park every night in different parts of the city. And then they meet, they shout, and they go to the closest place that they want to attack. It's either the Portland Police Association, it's the ICE headquarters, it's a different union hall. And all right, so we've seen that. I mean, over and it's like Groundhog Day. They go, they set fire to it, they smash windows, they let a dumpster on fire, repeat, 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 repeat. But now they're snaking into the streets, residential streets. They ran through
Are these like affluent neighborhoods that they're going into, or middle class neighborhoods, or?
most of Portland is middle class. Most of Portland, where they are, is kind of middle class, nice single family homes built, like 100 years ago. Sweet blocks, small blocks, not really well lit. Um, and that's a little unnerving, I think, because it's every night and it could be your neighborhood. And you don't really know. They also destroyed a business district the other night. They set fire to the I'm actually writing about this now. COVID had hit, and the business people got together and they got some outdoor tables and some barriers, and it had been up 3 days when the demonstrators swept through and set everything on fire.
Now, do
you
you
know,
do you do you find it kind of? I mean, what do you think about this phenomenon where we're seeing this sort of really kind of extreme radical stuff happen in the places where like the people are actually most amenable to this kind of politics, right? It's not really happening in the places where if you're seeing this from the vantage point of someone in Antifa or Black Bloc, you know, these are not the people that are actually really your enemy, right? Or like these are, the people that they're protesting. Like, doesn't it suggest that there's some interesting psychology going on where like it's not so much about some tangible desire to eliminate a threat so much as sort of like affect. I mean, these people are sort of like, this is like they're in the same like social, peer group in a way as the people that they're protesting, right? Like they're, allies, and if you want to go with the vocabulary, right? Like these are people who are probably your allies. They probably agree with you more than anyone else in the entire country. I mean, what do you think is going on? Why do we see it in those places and not places where, they're really polarized?
well, it's a little bit,
right?
I think it's two things. I think it's a little bit homegrown. If you were raised here with parents, let's say, who were, super progressive, then maybe this is a little bit of a next step. I do know a fellow journalist here whose daughter was arrested, as one of the protesters, and he's a very, very liberal journalist. Um, also, you're not going to, if you are of this ilk, you're not going to gravitate to maybe, Pocatello, Idaho. I don't know. It's just not going to be where you're going to find your people and where you're going to make a stand. It is really interesting though. It's like, okay, so Portland is a super liberal city. It's a beautiful city. It's small. They try to make it super livable. A lot of young people. But the next step in whatever this particular revolution is getting rid of the people in charge. Now, what they will do if they accomplish this is the question. I have yet to hear one idea that builds anything. Everything is about disassembling.
Do you know, has there been
right?
any like public opinion polling in Portland about this movement? Is it popular?
Well, I think just like anything else, like cancel culture, let's say, you've got a small, loud, cranky minority that does a lot of this shouting, and then you've got an equally kind of small, loud, cranky what minority on the other side that's opposing them. And most people sit in the middle because they're either A, they're kind of waiting to see which way the wind blows, or B, they're afraid. I will tell you, I have gotten at least a half dozen private messages in the past couple of days from people saying, I have part of this business organization, and the other 9 people in it have been like super like, yeah, I'm really for the cause. Yeah, they're really not so much anymore, but they don't want to say anything. They're afraid. And they're afraid because if you say anything, you're called a racist. It's like, well, no, I actually just didn't want my house burnt down. Well, I'm sorry, that's racist. I mean, there was something I saw yesterday. It's like, look, if someone breaks into your house repeatedly, you have to understand why they're doing it, and you have to let them because this has happened to their lives. I'm like,
what's curious to me,
okay.
Nancy, is that like this phenomena. It seems like the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland. These are among the most liberal places in America, right? Like they have the most people who are sympathetic to Black Lives Matter. Like it seems like if you were waging some kind of struggle or rebellion against the opposition to this stuff, it wouldn't be in these cities, right? Which makes me think that it's odd, or it's counterintuitive to see the most liberal places in America protesting against themselves when perhaps the locus of the problems are not even in those places at all. And so I'm wondering how much of this is like when you talk to people who are part of this, how much you think maybe this is a matter of self-actualization for them. Like they've been raised to believe these are problems. They feel really passionate about it. They're young. They're full of energy. So they have to go out and do something, even if it's not really, they're not necessarily addressing the problems they care about because those problems are maybe much more severe somewhere else, or they don't necessarily even have a concrete solution, but they feel like if they've been raised in this culture, and one of the highest kind of points of duty in this culture is to express these sentiments, that they have to keep doing it for that reason. I mean, we also have to factor into the reality that these people are not allowed to do anything else because it was pandemic, right? Like these everything was shut down. Schools were shut down. Social life was shut down. Concerts were shut down. You can only really have a concert if you go out and call it a protest. Then you can kind of hang out with your friends like you normally would in the summer. So how much of this is, I think, is about the people there kind of fulfilling their own kind of pent up psychological desires from one, being raised in this political culture, and two, just the fact they're not really allowed to do anything else. They can't really be kids right now.
I think that second part is very much true. When I saw some of the sort of low energy the other night, I thought, wow. And then these kids like one on one being so. I've had these kids one on one. They're black. They're all all like, and but when you talk to them one on one, they're just like. For the most part, they're just like polite kids. Oh, can I get you something? Can I get you some water? Would you like a donut? It's like, what? I think that if there were other things to do, they would be doing it. And maybe they would have even done this for a while. And now they would be bored and like, you know what? I'd like to do some other things. Um, I think also you're in an extremely white city. A friend of mine that I interviewed the other day who was raised, she's white, but she was raised in what she told me was the blackest county in America, which is St. George's County in Maryland. I'd never even heard of it. She said, Nancy, these are the people that are staging these. They stage them like they actually don't know any black people. Okay, but let's put that to the side for a second. I don't really think that no matter how much they're outside shouting about Black Lives Matter, I think they're energized by something else, which is just that sort of pent up, I'm young and I don't know what to do with it. So now this is this place where I will be legitimized and I will have cover to just go out, and whether it's just to be with people or it's to feel like I'm part of a solution or whether it's just to kick shit down, it's like I've got cover for all that stuff. Even though if you ask me what I really want, I'm going to be like, I mean, they just sloganeer at you. I have said to them, tell me what you want. And they just give me a slogan.
Mm-hmm. But Zed, to your point, and Sean made a similar point about the sort of the liberal context of where these protests are taking place. But like, I've reported a little bit on Antifa, especially when they were here where I live in the East Bay, and they were doing those battles in Berkeley, and what I saw was that the folks in Antifa do not see mainstream liberals as their constituency or their allies, at least from what I've seen. In fact, a protest I went to, the alt-right, there's a protest against the alt-right. The alt-right never showed up. Maybe like 5 people or something showed up and summarily got beat down.
Wow.
But this is the height of this, this mob violence in Berkeley.
Wow.
But the Black Bloc showed up, and so everybody in this park where the rally was taking place were all just Berkeley liberals, and a lot of them were being assaulted by Antifa. It's not as if, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it. It's not as if Antifa showed up and were like, okay, these liberals are the enemy, but there were a lot of altercations in which, like, just a regular liberal without a mask on, non-Antifa, would object to their perpetrating violence against people, and then they'd be like, and then Antifa would turn on the liberals because they're not, the idea was that they're not hardcore enough. They're not down for the cause. Like, I don't think that there was any solidarity within this group between the mainstream liberals and Antifa. So I'm not sure how relevant it is even that they're in Portland or Seattle from the point of view of folks who put on black and go around and, beat people up at night.
And
yeah, I guess I was just thinking.
When
it
was
seems
that
like
when you were talking about when were?
That was I want to say 2017.
I just interviewed someone who was there as he was part of the GOP at the time, kind of a young guy, and it definitely galvanized him to learn more about Antifa when he saw what was going on. Anyway, he'll be in an upcoming piece.
Okay, great.
So there's been like a lot of obviously usage of what's going on in Portland to sort of make broader like political points, for like the national political conversation, both on the right and the left, right? And obviously the work you're doing is to sort of bring nuance to that, right? I'm wondering, what do you think is there any sort of extrapolation for like national politics and national conversation about what's going on in Portland? Like, can you extrapolate? And if you do, what is it actually? And is it, how is it different from the caricature that you might see on the right and also on the left?
Well, I don't know if it's about extrapolating, but today when I got up and saw that CNN had run a piece that said, and it was run by CNN. I think it originated there, but of course it'd been picked up by a gazillion places. And it said, more than 500 people arrested in Portland since the protests started. And I was like, yeah, and so they started May 29th. We've had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that have been out, some of them behaving quite badly. The math on that does not seem to be, I mean, that's like not that many protesters arrested. And the new DA has exonerated 85% of them, or they're not going to be charged. So why do you run that article today? What is the purpose of it? The purpose of it, the only thing that I can see is that it's meant to make the police look like they're being aggressive. I really have a problem with this. I have a problem with any sort of coverage that is either at least to my mind, designed to either inflame things or pacify things. It's like, report what you're finding, right? And it's a lot more than either of those things. Is there a unified message? I don't think so. The only unified message I'm getting, and I'm sad to kind of say this, is that I don't really see it dying down. I even thought as of a couple of days ago, I mean, I was like, maybe they're just going to like go home. They're going to be bored. I don't really see it. We had there was a bomb threat today at the federal building. Who's the threat coming from? The right, the left? Who knows? Right? It is disrupting the city. I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's caustic, I think.
How do they know who you are, and how come they haven't turned on you, or have they?
It's really funny. I did get my camera stolen the other day, and then weirdly, I wrote about it. This kid got it back. He must have seen some other guy take it, and he got it back from me. This is crazy. The other day when I was talking to the Black Bloc kid who was talking to me, super nice and on and on. Like, I'm dressed like I had on like a little blue top and some pink pants, and he came up to me. He's like, "Press?" I'm like, yeah, but all their press people are dressed in full-on black with press. I mean, I've never worn a press pass in my life on my clothes. But I was like, the kid wanted to talk. They haven't really roughed me up. They kind of come up to me sometimes and they want me to know that they're there. Yeah, hi guys, fine, whatever. I will say, Proud Boys are coming tomorrow. It's going to be a big rally down on the waterfront, and I'm going to be there. And that will be interesting to see because I covered a rally for Reason last year, and it was really a bunch of political theater. Nothing happened at all. The temperature's different this time.
Mm-hmm. You expect violence?
Maybe. I really did see it as LARPing last time. Live action role playing. I think people they're more ready now. I don't know, they feel that they have support from the community or the country or the media, or they're just really pissed off at what's going on. That's the problem with this stuff, right? Even if you don't really know what's going on, but you're just making a big scene about it, who is this attracting? You're attracting that Yahoo the other night that roundhouses the guy in the head. Who I don't think has affiliation with anybody, some skanky street guy.
I wanted to ask that actually because that video obviously has gotten a lot of attention. Are those incidents of violence that you see on these viral videos, are those actually protesters or even Antifa folks, or can you even, is there even much of a distinction to be made now between just sort of random marauding criminals and protesters?
I think that there is. I think, and people get really, when I call people protesters, I get a lot of people going, don't you call them protesters, they're rioters. And if you call them rioters, it's like, what are you, against the First Amendment? I'm like, now I'm trying to call them demonstrators, to try and cut it in the middle. I think any movement that's starting, that has as much of a glow as this does, is going to attract people that are going to use it for their own agenda, right? And these kids that hang out at the 7-Eleven, they just want to fuck shit up, right? So you're going to attract that too. So I do not think that guy, Marquise Love, I think was his name, something like that. I don't think he had affiliation with anybody. I think that some of the maybe more right wing media, because maybe there was someone down there that, shouted Black Lives Matter or had like a fake security thing, they want to make it look like he was part of Black Lives Matter. I didn't see it that way at all. That's not what I've seen any of the Black Lives Matter people doing. So I think
Yeah,
that's
I
just
think
sort
it
of a
kind of
rando.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what you were saying before. It's not that, these people have any official affiliations or any even political beliefs. It's more that there's just this blanket moral cover, right? So that people just feel sort of, empowered and justified in doing these things because they know the authorities, the people up top, sort of look at it, not with approval necessarily, but with some sympathy.
It's
maybe.
weird though because like I spent some time at Occupy LA when that thing was happening, and I have I've known a lot of, and I've interviewed and known a lot of anarchist activists in the past, and there is a ideology there, right, and there is a set of values there among folks who espouse sort of anarchism as their political philosophy, and it has to do generally with radical democratic self-governance. And in the Occupy movement, you saw people trying to exercise that vision, even far from perfectly. Like, Occupy LA ended up just being this madhouse, but there was a real effort to do these general assemblies and break out into these affinity groups and do real self-governance. It didn't succeed. In this case, the gap between the ideology and the action seems much wider. Like, maybe I just haven't read the right pieces, but I haven't gotten the sense that there's any effort to build a coherent sort of model, to model their anarchist principles. It just seems like the pejorative anarchy, the associations that most people have with the word anarchy, which is just marauding bands of criminals beating the shit out of people and fucking shit up. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, has there been an effort to model any sort of a anarchist political model as there was with the Occupy movement?
Not that I know of. There could be things happening behind the curtain that I don't know about, of course. But I wonder, like, which is preferable? Like, would you rather it be just sort of like random floating, marauding bands that really just can't find their ass with both hands, but they can mess up other people? Or do you want there to be, something else like really happening here? Okay, we are going to abolish the police. We are going to close all the jails. We are going to remove all of our elected officials. We are going to, what's next? They burnt up a social services building the other day where apparently, one of the local representatives came out and said, hey, guess what, guys? Congratulations. It's where we had the first gay marriage in the state, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? So I don't know if I would prefer it to just be people that are super confused, or if you wanted organized. I don't think you do. I don't, I don't know. I don't know where it's going. I don't know who's supporting it. There's a bail fund that back in June had $500,000 in it. People are putting it in to, like, get people out of jail. When those kids marauded through the Kenton neighborhood and set the tables on fire, boom, the next day they had $2,500 from the protesters. It wasn't the kids that had set the tables on fire that gave them that money. There are people that are sympathetic to this, and they're going to, maybe they're not going to be the ones running down the streets, but they're going to give a little money to make sure that the kids that are protected.
Nancy, to answer your question about whether we're better off with an organized or a disorganized anarchist movement, I would say certainly back in the Occupy days, I would say certainly we're better off. I mean, I'm not entirely unsympathetic to some of the aims of these radical movements. And back in the Occupy days, I would say certainly I would far prefer to see an organized anarchist movement that is actually trying to exercise its political values. But now I'm not so sure. And the difference is that I feel like between the time of Occupy and now, there's been this Rubicon that's been crossed, which is that Occupy was very emphatically a nonviolent movement. Certainly if you don't consider property destruction to be violent, then it was a nonviolent movement. I mean, I think these folks have always believed in property destruction as a tactic, but not attacks on human beings, and that has been abandoned with extreme prejudice to the point where physical violence against human beings is considered a completely legitimate tactic among folks like that. So now it's hard to say, whether I would like people to be poorly organized or better organized. I certainly wouldn't want to see a better organized violent movement. And what I'm wondering about is, you've said already that you don't see this movement going away in Portland. So just to explain to the viewers the sudden background change, we had some internet problems, so Nancy's moved to a different location. Anyway, what I was going to say is, you've said that that you don't see this movement or this violence going away anywhere in Portland. What happens if Trump wins re-election? What does Portland look like in that scenario?
That is a very interesting question because, the first thing you'd think is like, wow, oh my God, everything just explodes. And that's possible. I also have noticed that when people come at these protesters, and it's just, again, the ones that I've seen. Now, as a group, they feel powerful. They maraud things. They scream. But when you push back at them, and it could be the case that groups in Portland start to push back at them, they fold. And most of them are really young. I mean, you saw that piece I wrote, that young girl. It's like, you're not allowed to film. This is what they say. You're not allowed to film. It's like, okay, First of all, who said? Like, do you know what country we live in? And yes, I am allowed to film. And that woman came right back into her face and she folded like a cheap suit. Is that an expression? Folded like a cheap suit? Anyway, I wonder if you get, if Trump is reelected, if you then get more of either parts of the populace feeling empowered to push back against this movement, or people that are elected, or people that were going to be elected or not elected. I wonder if it will just be all hell, the city gets burnt to ashes, which right now, if they had their way, that's where it goes. Just goes. And people are moving. I mean, people are leaving. I interviewed a guy the other day. He's like, we came here 3.5 years ago. We really thought we were going to kind of live our ideals. We're getting out.
Huh.
So, my house is actually on the market right now, but I left last summer. But yeah, I didn't want to stay here for a variety of reasons. But it's not a place I would certainly live any longer. But so if you've got a different government here that is not going to, give these movements the same liberty, maybe we go back to, or not back to what was, but a different kind of climate. I don't know.
Hi, this is Zed. If you like our show, please help us keep it going by becoming a patron at patreon.com/thebackchannel. Thanks.